Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Ward. I am a registered nurse. I am currently enrolled in the McKendree BSN program, and I am in nursing 472, which is the final class before I graduate with my BSN. So it's very, very exciting. It's been a long journey, but it's been worth it. So most likely, all of us in this room have experienced some sort of incivility over our professional career. So you may ask, what is incivility? Well, we're going to be talking about that specifically a little bit later and defining what that is. As you see, this presentation that I have for you this morning is an evidence-based project concerning a healthy work environment. So the purpose of this presentation is to identify factors contributing to incivility or bullying and identify 3 key strategies to fight against incivility. There's also 3 objectives for this presentation. One of them, the first one, is that after viewing healthy work environment presentation, then 80% of the adults here present will identify 3 negative behaviors which contribute to incivility by written exam. The second objective is that after viewing the healthy work environment presentation, then 80% of the adult audience will identify 3 strategies to promote a healthy work environment by written exam. And the third objective is that after viewing the healthy work environment presentation, then 80% of the adults present will identify 3 resources to further their knowledge base regarding incivility by written exam. So bullying. So bullying is a lot more prevalent today than ever before, and surprisingly, as I was doing research and reading, it's a lot more prevalent than you might think. So here's some statistics for you from the Workplace Bullying Institute. They said that 19% of Americans are bullied. Another 19% witness that. 61% of Americans are aware of abusive conduct in the workplace. 60.4 million Americans are affected by it. That's a lot. 70% of perpetrators are men. 60% of targets are women. So I have a video for you that we're going to view. It's a very short video, and it's from the American Nurses Association, really talking about incivility and bullying and the effects that it has on us as healthcare professionals.
Hello, I'm Pam Cipriano, President of the American Nurses Association. Nurses expect to work in environments where they will be treated with civility, kindness, dignity, and respect. But here's the hard truth. Bullying and workplace violence are real problems in healthcare. Violence of any form should not be tolerated from any source. Nurses and employers must work together to create strategies that will shift the culture to one of civility and respect, where bullying is not tolerated and where violence prevention and safety measures are a priority. ANA has released a new position statement on workplace violence and bullying that offers recommendations, including setting a zero-tolerance policy, encouraging employees to report violent incidents, and developing a comprehensive violence prevention program. Creating this type of culture helps protect the health, safety, and wellness of nurses, and that's in everyone's best interest. Learn more about this issue and get resources to create best practices at nursingworld.org. ANA cares about you. Working together, we can create a safer and healthier work environment.
So if you go to nursingworld.org, that's a website that was created by American Nurses Association, or the ANA. They describe 4 types of violence. And this actually comes from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And the 4 different types, the first one is criminal intent. So this means that the perpetrator has no relationship with the victim, and the violence is carried out in conjunction with a crime. So most of the time, we're not going to see that specifically in a healthcare setting. You have a customer-client which is the most common healthcare environment-based assault. This is where the perpetrator is a member of the public with whom the nurse or healthcare staff is taking care of them and interacting during the course of your role of taking care of the patient. Then you have worker on worker, and this is commonly what we will see amongst one another. It's commonly perceived as bullying. In these instances, the perpetrator and the victim, they work together, though not necessarily in the same role or at the same level. Then lastly, you have personal relationship. In these incidences, the victim has been targeted as a result of an existing exterior relationship with the perpetrator, with the violence taking place in the workplace. So currently there's no specific federal statute or law that requires workplace violence protection. But several states have enacted legislation or regulations aimed at promoting health care workers from its effects. The ANA supports these movements and this legislation, and they're advocating further and more stringent regulation regarding incivility and bullying and violence. So they formulated a position statement regarding violence, incivility, and bullying, and here's some of those key points. The first point being that the nursing profession will not tolerate violence of any kind from any source. The second one, the nurses and employers must collaborate to create a culture of respect. Thirdly, the adoption of evidence-based strategies that prevent and mitigate incivility, bullying, and workplace violence, and promote health, safety, and wellness and optimal outcomes in healthcare. The strategies employed are listed and categorized by primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. And lastly, the statement is relevant for all healthcare professionals and stakeholders, not exclusively to nurses. So I know this group is not just a group of nurses, but also radiologic technologists. So really, even though they use the word nurses quite a bit through this presentation, it applies to all of us as healthcare professionals. So the teaching points for this presentation, we're going to be looking at incivility and bullying, reporting incivility, promoting a healthy work environment, and respectful conversations. So first, let's take a look at incivility and bullying. Well, there are separate definitions for them. You see that incivility is one or more rude, discourteous, or disrespectful actions that may or may not have negative intent behind them. You have bullying, which is repeated, unwanted, harmful actions intended to humiliate, offend, and cause distress in the recipient. And this comes from the ANA. Now, there is a difference between the two. And I would say that most likely all of us in this room at some time or another have contributed to incivility. Because you see, with incivility, it's more so of not realizing you're doing what you're doing. Whereas bullying is more intentional. It's saying, hey, I want to hurt somebody, I want to cause them grief, I want to humiliate them, offend them, and cause distress. So that's kind of the differentiation between the two. One is non-intentional, one is intentional. So as we see here, this is the conceptual framework of bullying. And there are four key components to this. The first one being negative behaviors of the perpetrator, power and balance between victim and perpetrator, duration and persistent negative behaviors of perpetrator, and negative effects of bullying on victim. So if we look here at the first one, this negative behaviors of the perpetrator, you'll see that comes in the form of personal attack, erosion of professional incompetence and reputation, and attack through work roles and tasks. So if we move on to power and balance between the victim and the perpetrator, you'll see that it comes in two forms. It comes in a group form and also a positional form. So the group form, we have intergroup and intergroup. So the difference being that intergroup is 4 or 5 people, however many numbers there is in this group, that they have conflict within the group. So it's those select individuals. Intergroup conflict is where you have 2 separate groups that come against each other. So one is within, one is between. So that's the big difference between the intra and the intergroup conflict. We also have position. So it's vertical and horizontal. So it may come from your supervisor, from your manager, from your administrative team, or it may go, which would be vertical, or it may go lateral or horizontal between one another as colleagues and healthcare professionals. Now, if we look at duration and persistent negative behaviors of the perpetrator, you'll see that it's gradual and cumulative of a process. So usually it's slow and steady. The old adage, a slow and steady drop fills the bucket. Well, in this instance, it's more of a negative thing. But you know what? This is just something that occurs slowly and takes time. So you can see that how severe negative effects that this could cause on a victim because it's a slow and gradual process. So, negative effects. Negative effects of bullying on the victim comes in three different aspects. There's physical effects, which is defined as physical symptoms related to stress, exacerbation of chronic illnesses. So the stress that's put on them from bullying or incivility flares up their chronic diseases. You have the psychological effects that comes in the form of a perspective reaction, an emotional reaction, or a behavioral reaction. Then, lastly, there's occupational effects that can create adverse work conditions and poor patient care. So if we really look at that and say, you know what, not only is this affecting the individual, but really you're affecting the patient because they're not going to be able to do their job as well. So it doesn't take much insight to realize the potential for catastrophic events to occur by the victim because of the way they're treated. So how do we manage? How do we fight against bullying? How do we create a healthy work environment? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So we have to report incivility. You have to take a stand. You have to be proactive. So there's a handout that I gave you, and this comes from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. They created a mnemonic, be aware and care. This tool is used just to educate us and regarding bullying and how to respond effectively to bullying. So be aware and care. The first one is bullying. Well, RWJ, they define bullying a little bit different than the ANA. They say that bullying is a purposeful attempt to control another person through verbal abuse. And then it's important to remember that bullies can be superiors, subordinates, or colleagues. So it really can come from different facets. You have E for exist. You have to know that if an environment does not hold up high standards for the way people treat each other, then bullying may be more likely and or prevalent to occur. It can also lead to a loss of valuable human capital and medical errors. That's something that I didn't realize till after the research, was how much money is lost through our healthcare system because of people quitting due to incivility or bullying, and what it costs to replace them and to train them and to get them back taking care of patients. You have A for acknowledge. Acknowledge that bullying may be a problem in your organization. Your nurse or organizational leaders should talk about bullying frequently. They should encourage you guys as staff to speak up against incivility and to be heard. The more it's acknowledged, the more you can do about it. Leaders that minimize the impact from incivility or deny it exists create a culture of silence that impedes solutions to this problem. That's one of the worst things that you can do is be silent about incivility or bullying. Oftentimes we can put this on our manager or our organizational administrative team to control or to fight against bullying. But you are the frontline leaders. So you have to take ownership and say, you know what, I'm going to stop this in the front line. I'm going to advocate for myself, I'm going to advocate for my colleagues, and I'm going to advocate for my patient. So watch, W. Watch for the signs of bullying throughout the workplace. Be sure that your supervisors and managers know how to recognize the signs of bullying. Don't wait for it to be brought to your attention or to their attention. You need to see it, recognize, and deal with it appropriately. So take an active role in your department. Get involved. You have R for reflect. Reflect on the incident and reflect on your action. Reflect on what was perceived to go wrong and to start to reflect on what went well. So analyzing the incident may help you along this journey of battling and responding to bullying. And there's three ways that you can reflect. Reflect on action, which is the past experience. Reflect in action as an incident happens, and reflect for action. Actions that you may wish to take in the future if this circumstance should rise again. You have E for empower. So empower your staff or colleagues to collectively and safely respond to bullying that they see and hear. Recognize, create mechanisms for staff to confidentially report bullying issues in the workplace without fear of retaliation. And lastly, C for care. Well, by definition, care it's defined as effort made to do something correctly, safely, or without causing damage. Things that are done to keep someone healthy, safe, painstaking, or watchful attention. So, be aware and care. Reporting incivility. It's also important to train and educate staff. Make sure your department regularly speaks to bullying. The more education that you get, the easier it is to respond and or eliminate bullying. We have to collaborate because working together, we can stand against bullying. One person can build a house, but it's a lot easier to build a house if you have a whole crew, and it goes a lot faster. Anonymous reporting is super important. This is more of an organizational issue that they need to promote and stand behind and say, you know what, it's okay, you're not going to have any retribution for reporting incivility or bullying. You should feel safe to report it. You have organizational support. This is the responsibility of your organization to support and encourage any positive action taken against bullying. They need to stand behind you. And then also a zero tolerance policy. This isn't an organizational administrative issue per se, but they need to make sure that that flows downstream, that they let all of you know that, you know what, we're setting a standard of zero tolerance. If there's incivility or bullying, it's automatic termination. So, promoting a healthy work environment. There's 6 healthy work environment standards, and this is from the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. The first one, being very important, is skilled communication. Nurses must be as proficient in communication skills as they are in clinical skills. If you can't get the words out that you really want to say effectively, work on that, because people's perceptions and the way they take things can often cause more conflict that's not meant to be there. You have true collaboration. Nurses must be relentless in pursuing and fostering true collaboration. Thirdly, effective decision making. Nurses must be valued and committed partners in making policy, directing, and evaluating clinical care, and leading organizational operations. Fourth is appropriate staffing. Staffing must ensure the effective match between patient needs and nurse competencies. So I know that this can often be lead to frustrations among staff is when you're short-staffed, you have a hard day, you've got a big load, and it makes it a lot easier to be snippy or to have a short fuse when communicating or dealing with your coworkers. The fifth standard is meaningful recognition. Nurses must be recognized and must recognize others for the value each other brings to the work of the organization. And 6, authentic leadership. Nurse leaders must fully embrace the imperative of a healthy work environment, authentically live it, and engage others in achievement. So how do you manage difficult conversations? They're called difficult conversations because they are emotionally charged. There may be a power differential between those having them, and there is often a fear of retribution for expressing a person's feelings and perceptions. So it's a very big barrier to having difficult conversations either with your manager or with your coworker because of how emotional it can get, and some people just don't want to face a tough situation. Well, difficult conversations are just that. They're difficult. It takes courage to participate in both the giver and the receiver's perspective. Difficult conversations must occur before true communication and collaboration can be reached. And it's important to note that this occurs at all levels of an organization and between people. It occurs at all levels of an organization between every profession. So it's just not among the nursing profession, but all healthcare providers. So people do not come to work with the intention to be incivil or to be bullying. They start with an intent to do a good job and work together with their colleagues, and then something goes awry. There is no intentional to make a nurse, a student, or resident cry and go home feeling in failure. However, behaviors can lead to those reactions. So in efforts to manage difficult conversations, you must have respectful conversations. So there is a 5-step reference that I gave you as a handout if you want to follow along. I'm actually going to be giving you a handout with this information as a pocket guide, so that way it'll be easily accessible and for your convenience. So 5 steps to engage in respectful conversation. Step 1, plan for the conversation. You have to validate the facts. You got to make sure what's made you angry or concerned or feel like you're bullying, that it's actually factual and that's what they were meaning. So you need to make sure you determine the focus of the conversation before you go into it. Not have bunny trails and just spray thoughts of ideas, but really have a plan of what needs to be said, how it needs to be said. You need to create an environment conducive to effective communication. Allot adequate time to hold or to have the conversation without interruption. And determine who should participate in the conversation, whether that be your manager, your colleague that joins you with the perpetrator. Step 2, check perception. Start the conversation with the reasons for the meeting. So be direct, but be brief, and then stop. Take a pause. Silence is not a bad thing. Ask the other person or persons what their perception is of the event. Step 3, deliver the message. Repeat the situation. Repeat what you brought up in step 1 of the main concern, but give more information behind it. Tell them more about the story. Provide background information leading up to the event. So oftentimes that we may not understand what's going on maybe in your coworker's personal life, or the patient that they're taking care of, or the loss that they've just had in their life, which are factors of why they may have been short with you, may have been more direct with you, or came across as incivil. Also describe the impact as you deliver the message to the situation on building and sustaining human capital and impairing patient outcomes. Step 4, empathize. Provide a gracious space with good intentions and respect through the conversation. Be comfortable with pauses or silence and truly listen. Listen to the other side of the story. Listen to the other person and what they have to say. Don't let it just go in one ear and out the other, but truly listen. Also, be sensitive and straightforward. And it doesn't hurt to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Step 5, summarize and follow up. Review the highlights of the conversations. Hit the main points one more time. Check for understanding. Make sure that they know exactly what you're trying to say and the way you feel. Determine a plan of action before the meeting ensues to put in place after the meeting. So what are we going to do next? And arrange time to follow up regarding the conversation. So in summary, 61% of Americans are aware of abusive conduct in the workplace. 60.4 million Americans are affected by it. Be aware and care. Educate yourself and others. Educate yourself regarding bullying, incivility, violence, how to prevent it, how to stand against it, and what you can do on a front line as staff to create a healthy work environment. And foster respectful conversations.
Yes.
So Vicki Good, she has this quote here, and it's healthy work environments are the cornerstone for keeping our patients safe from harm. When open communication and true collaboration come together, our patients benefit. And I think that's one of the most important things of this whole discussion is realizing how much this actually affects the patient, and that we need to do whatever we can to give the best patient care possible. And part of that is creating a healthy work environment. Are there any questions? So these are my references for my presentation. So thank you for giving me your time and opportunity to address such critical subject matter such as incivility and bullying. Be the change that you want to see happen in your organization. If you look at the very last page of your handouts, there is a written exam. And if you would, please complete that, put your name on it, and turn that into me. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.